So we're live, Tomas. Hello, welcome everyone to today's podcast.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm here with Tomas. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Mario?
I'm good. Maybe you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, so very quickly, I guess over the talk, you'll understand better what exactly I'm doing, because I guess the titles of our both don't say much, actually, in my opinion. I'm personally heading members area and loyalty groups at Wix.
Yeah.
And what are you doing, Mario?
Well, I'm heading another team at Wix, Wix Forms team. And how long are you at Wix already?
It's always a very difficult question because it's my second time in the company. So basically now I'm for 2 years. But the first time I joined, I don't recall, 6 years or something. So depends how you count it. In my heart, I'm for 6 years, I guess.
You remember, I joined when you were in your first cycle. And you left the day after I joined.
Yeah,
we went for lunch together the first day.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember. I remember because it was like I go to lunch with one dude, and then the day after he left the company. So
okay.
It was,
Maybe there's the reason, Mario.
Yeah, but let's not talk about it today. It's not the point
not the topic.
Not the point of the podcast. So why we're doing this podcast, Thomas?
So I guess we want to talk about one thing which is very widely talked about in the industry, especially if you are in a bit smaller companies or companies where you're not that elaborate in being data-driven, right? So data-driven, in many cases, it sounds like it's something, the thing that will solve all your problems. You just have data and that's it. Your problems are gone. And what we want to talk about is that that's not necessarily true. Sometimes, it doesn't work out, there are numerous examples that we will share with you, cases, tips, and tricks how to avoid that. But basically, at least, I guess, how this all started, that Mario and myself, we started thinking, okay, maybe we should do some podcast or presentations or something, and what we should talk about. And one thing in common that we noticed is that even both of us are very deeply into being data-driven. We found out that data-driven doesn't necessarily always give all the answers that you would like to solve all your problems that you have. At least that's my view. How do you think?
Well, I think, over the years I have been mentoring people at Wix, product managers, UX designers, in general, how to build products. And the main problem everyone finds is believing on the data almost blindly. And they start looking at it like the holy grail. And it is true, many times data give you the answers, but other times, maybe not. And maybe today we can bring some light into it, when to look at the data and believe on it 100%, and when you should actually be careful about it and on making your decisions smartly, not just thinking on the data.
Yeah, and I guess we'll elaborate a bit on, when basically KPIs can fail to work, when it's, not enough just to blindly follow them. Why, to understand the difference, basically, it's one thing to say that you have a KPI, and that KPI for you is a goal, a North Star that you're aiming for. And it's a very different thing to say, okay, I have a KPI just as a plain number, and all I do is just to follow it as, a quantitative thing, and that's it. I just follow it blindly. And there's a big difference in that, and we'll talk about it a bit later. Also, I guess we'll touch a bit, why analysts alone, business data analyst alone, cannot solve all your problems, because I think that's also one of the things that I hear quite often in other companies. We have data, let's just hire a data analyst and all our problems will be gone, all the business problems will be gone. Again, not true. We'll share why later, and I guess many more things.
Yeah. Maybe we're going to start. I can tell the story about why following data blindly is not great. So a couple of years ago, we developed actually a new product. I don't know if you know, but I used to work in blog. And in blog, we released a place where we actually write content, right? So we have a text editor where users can actually start writing their content. And it had a thing. When you write the content, you have the publish button at the end of the page. So when you start writing a lot of content, you actually start losing the button, because the button is at the end of the page. It's not sticky, and you could lose it.
So you're writing a blog post, you're writing it, and it gets sticky.
Yeah, it was not a sticky. It was going below default, especially if you write a very long post. If you want to be performing good in SEO, you need to write a long post. It needs to be good content, and it doesn't fit in one screen. And we said, okay, maybe we need to do a change and make the button and put the button sticky on the top. Because if you want to publish, you want to know where is the button, right? You want to see where it is. And it's a main KPI for blog, right? Blog needs to write blog posts and they need to actually find where to publish. So we released this new product. We wanted to do other changes also. We wanted to make it more beautiful, to change a little bit the UI, but the main change was we move the CTA from the bottom to the top and we make it sticky. So we did as a very good product managers and we A/B tested. And we released a version with the button still on the bottom of the page that can go under default, and B version with the bottom sticky, and that is on the top. What do you think it happened? Like after the release, A and B version, do you think
Of course, the new product won. Like you spent so much time, so it had to win, no?
Well, it's a small change. It's not that much time, but actually it lost.
Okay.
And it lost and we got less post publishes being actually published, and it's a bit counterintuitive because the button is more visible, and we started looking into it, like why so much of actually was a big drop of it.
Okay, so basically, just to put this, purely understandable for everyone, like you make a change where a button becomes a lot more visible to your users.
Yeah,
but users tend to click it less.
Much less. It was like a big drop, and we started thinking how this is even possible. First thought, someone made a mistake on the data. There is no events being sent. Something is going wrong. It cannot be. The button is visible. The other gets invisible. And we couldn't figure it out what happened. And then through the data, we started, digging a little bit more, going into different type of users, going deeper and deeper and deeper. And then we found out that as longer is the post, the bigger is the gap on B and A group. Like less users are publishing as longer is the post. So what we did, let's try it ourselves. We go to the product B version, write a long post, and there was a very funny bug. The button was getting hidden and hidden and hidden because the screen was going down and the button is slowly, so you write the one sentence, boom, a little bit hidden. So it was a bug, and it was a great way to actually to test things and see that there was an issue. So we fixed it and we tested again. What do you think it happened second time?
So now it gets sticky, finally. So I don't know, maybe you didn't even do an A/B test because obviously, for sure, it should be clicked more.
No, we actually run the A/B test. And,
okay.
Yeah.
And
it lost again.
Okay. Another bug?
Another bug, no. Actually, there is one thing that a lot of people do on the internet, and is I write somewhere else, especially now with AI, right? I write in ChatGPT or I write in any other platform that I want to write the content because it's more comfortable for me. And then I copy and I paste.
Okay.
So when you copy and paste, again, we had another bug on the copy paste and the button was getting hidden again. And it helped us understand that sometimes doing A/B tests help you with QA, and you cannot test everything manually. It's impossible to test all the edge cases and everything, but it helped to figure it out. So we fixed it again, and we launched another A/B test, third one. What do you think it happened now?
So it's 3 times in a row you did fixes and 3
twice. We did twice fix.
Okay,
now we granted the name.
And 1 more A/B test.
Yes.
Okay. It must be finally fixed now.
Yeah, actually, we saw no change.
Okay.
Like
in the amount of clicks.
In the amount of publishes.
Okay.
And it's very interesting because we now made the button much more visible for our users and we expect to get more clicks. But it made a lot of sense if you think it through, because if you write a long post, you are going to find the button where it is. So it doesn't matter if it's at the end of the page or at the beginning of the page. You have seen it already and you will actually find how to publish the actual post. So not always when you do products, you will see improvements. By the way, we released it even though it didn't improve anything because we thought it's just more clear, it's a better UX. But theoretically, we could have left also the previous version because when we always launch things, we always want to improve and we want to actually make things better. So yeah, it's an interesting thing that you should not always believe the data how it is, because if we will have believed the first time and not look into it more, we will even have dropped it thinking that moving the bottom to the top is not interesting. The second time the same, we could have gave up, but at the end we actually release it.
Okay. So basically, what were our KPIs for this? Just publishing? That's it?
When we always release something, we always check one KPI. One is the main KPI that we want to improve. One, maybe two. In this case, because it was clear, right? It's one CTA publish. The CTA says publish, so we measure how many people clicks on the CTA and actually completes the funnel. We also check other KPIs. We want to make sure that there is nothing wrong, but it's more like sanity, right? You check that your conversion is still going good, that your revenues are still going good, that any other thing on the product is going good. But yeah, mainly one KPI. Have it ever happened to you that you run an A/B test, your main KPI is stable or is winning, and then you see something else that you put for secondary and is dropping?
Basically, in one of the companies I worked before, we had this interesting case where basically we were launching very new product. It's very new, something that we had a lot of beliefs in due to the circumstances back then, a lot of people. It's a B2C product, so it's a content-related product, B2C, so we expect people to consume content. So basically, the interesting thing which happened is that, the primary way of the marketing of that product was purely organic. So which means that, we just put ads in random places. We wait for, people to come. And we just want to test with lowest amount possible, like the least amount of money spent, on ads and even before going with ads to see what happens, right? So what we expected, is we basically targeted this whole product into higher end users, the subscription price was high and so on. And we put the organic ads and we saw actually users coming in, installs, great. Then we started looking deeper. Okay, so we have, daily active users. They were not in high numbers. I would say they were in 10s or 20s and so on. And the interesting thing here was that we kind of kept publishing content, like new content for the users, right? We had to do it because it was like a content app, right? So, and the content, like the tastes of content are basically very different of different people, right? So although we had this target in mind where, it's high-end users with high-end subscriptions, the overall marketing and the people who were coming to this platform, let's say, they were with a bit different tastes. But what we were trying to do in a data-driven way, when we were ordering new content, we were thinking, okay, so the content that we order should be based on what our users like most, right? Mm-hmm. And even in the beginning, we added content targeting, very high-end users. We had a bit different users coming in. And as you can imagine, what this ended up with is that those users kept liking the content that are not necessarily liked by very high-end users. So we ended up initially having quite some users, quite some active users coming daily, liking the content which is not necessarily liked by high-end users. So we kept putting more and more content which will not be liked by high-end users. And basically this circle kept spinning, right? So we have content which is like basically liked by users who will not probably even pay. They will be okay to, watch ads or something, but we will not pay for subscription. And basically this was a dissonance for us because, the expected product market fit was very different than it ended up with. And to be honest, I don't know how exactly now that product is going on, but it was very interesting back then, to see that, like how we were basically led to a very different product market fit, and like we were data driven. Like we wanted, to add the content based on what users like. That's everyone would do, right? But without having the context in place, what kind of users there were, basically a mistake was done there. Mm-hmm. And I think that this context part is kind of very important here. I think if you don't have enough like context when looking into data, I think that's basically one of the ways how you can fail, or it's one of the ways where it's one of the times when it's not enough just to look into that data, right? And I think, in my opinion, that's probably what happened even with your example, right? That you had a KPI, and this change, I would assume that many of the companies wouldn't even care to do A/B test. It's obvious, you have a button more prominent. Of course, people will click a lot more frequently. But it didn't happen. You saw a drop, okay? So it's good that you started making a context out of it, going yourselves, looking what's happening exactly, knowing the context that some people copy-paste. That's, again, the context, right? And I think that's very important. So that's, where you have a KPI, and without this context, you can, just make the mistakes easily.
But there is a lot of people that says what Edward Owen says, right? Without data, you are just another person without an opinion, right? You need to have data and not an opinion. And I like that I heard a lot the other part of the sentence, right? That without an opinion, you are just another person with data. So you need to have both. You need to have an opinion, a context on what you are looking at, and you need to believe on something. You cannot just come and blindly follow the data or blindly follow your opinion, right? You need to have some kind of point in between. And I remember at the beginning of the podcast, you said a lot of companies believe that data analysts will solve everything on you will get the answers from them, right? And I'm very grateful for the data analysts we have in the teams. They are amazing, and they actually get us a lot of answers, but they need the context. Whenever we give them a question, the first thing they ask is can you explain me the whole picture? I need to know what you're actually trying. Don't ask me, get me this number or get me that number. And a lot of times I ask this question, then they ask me back, tell me why. And then when I explain it, they said, okay, wait, you need these other things. I will check these other things, and maybe we could check this other thing over there. So
it's teamwork, it's teamwork. Because I often heard, or sometimes even hear, people saying, hey, we need a data analyst here to solve the problems. And I know basically in advance that in often cases that won't necessarily be true, and not because data analysts cannot solve it. No, because as I said, being data-driven, actually it's teamwork. And all this context, in my opinion, is usually brought by this, people in the team. So even I'm not sure exactly how it went in your example, which you mentioned, when you had this mistake with the composer. Was it just the data analyst who kept pushing to go further and look probably it was a teamwork.
It was a teamwork. Actually a teamwork, not just of the data and the product. It was a UX involved. It was a QA involved. Everyone was involved, because at the end of the day, we are all building this product, right?
Yeah, actually, even right now, speaking of context and teamwork, even at these days, it's a confidential example I cannot share, but we have one problem right now. It's basically a very deep problem, which involves many teams at Wix from many different countries. And basically, at the end of the day, we see one KPI being shitty. Literal shitty every day, constantly. There is no a big drop of one thing. It's a bit of a technical problem, most likely, but it heavily affects the product experience, heavily. Users are angry, complaining, so on. And, we kind of tried, okay, so if it's a technical problem, you would say, okay, so developers can simply fix it, right? And there were tens of engineers who looked into that, tens of amazingly, super talented engineers, one of the best ones, that I've worked with. And the problem is not that obvious. You cannot easily reproduce that problem. We then thought, okay, should we try to try to record those cases, if a user is doing something, trying to perform that action, what happens then, to basically understand what's happening or what. So then we thought, okay, let's take the data-driven approach. So the obvious thing was, okay, let's just take a lot of data analysts and solve the problem. Actually, that's what we tried to do. And what we could quickly understand, that there was a context problem. So we had this interesting thing where, product, technical people, they have a context, we have guesses what might be wrong. You have a data analyst, so okay, amazing with data, but you need a teamwork to basically explain, to give suggestions what likely is happening, right? And then, you need to start spinning this wheel. Once you start spinning this wheel, there's more and more context put, you have more and more data. Then little by little, you get, more context, you get better. You put more input KPIs, about which I'll want to talk also a bit later more. And basically, that's I think the way to go. Even, you mentioned AI. Like one interesting thing I would say is speaking about context and, this like being purely data driven. Like, I guess we could use like a very similar metaphor here that, not sure if you heard, but if you look at the performance of what we call AI today, actually at some games, it's human plus AI, which outperforms AI. That sounds completely understandable, right?
Yes.
So I think that's a very similar thing that we have here. If we have a data and if we have a context, that's, the combo which will work, right? Because that will help to move forward.
But there were a lot of people that will tell you probably, I'm in a small company. I don't have enough users.
Yeah.
What will you tell to them actually when you have a small population of users?
So here, I guess I have a story to tell.
Yeah.
I have a story to tell, a horror story to tell. I would say it's one of the experiences I will remember for a long time, because there's a lot of my fault there as well. I love being data driven. I love data every day. I like query data myself. I look into the data tools. That's like super important. But sometimes it's a bit too much. And when is it too much? Like, I'll give you an example. So once we were in a very early stage startup, where like there were some nuances where to put data tools in place was very expensive. Like, I cannot elaborate on the details. Why? Because then, you could easily understand what company it is and what product it was, so on. But basically, it was very difficult to add the data tools in place. So basically, we had to spend like, I don't recall exactly, maybe at least a few months of dev time, at least one dev time, plus, there was a product person overseeing that and so on, just to get the right data in place. And when I say right, so the way we expected and wanted it to look, right? So it took a few months to put it in place. Okay, we did it. Finally, we have a data the way we want in the tool we love, for which we pay, by the way, right? So 2 months, during which we were more or less, I would say, blind. We launched the product, and it's early stages. We don't want to, again, overinvest in marketing. And okay, so early on, what you have in any type of product that you launch, you have a very little amount of users, right? Unless, something booms, unless you're ChatGPT, OpenAI, whatever. But if it's a standard product, most likely you will have little amount of users.
Yeah, adoption time. You need time to adopt
it takes
the product,
time, right?
Yeah.
So we have this, super amazing, like industry-leading tools where we see our data, everything, comes together nicely. But the thing is, like, the amount of users is low, right? And now when the amount of users is low, it's actually one of the places where you can make a lot of mistakes with data. Because, if you start looking into percentages, like relative numbers, like, one day, let's say you can see that, okay, there's a completion rate of something is 66%. Okay, looks super bad, right? But if you look deeper in the absolute numbers, you see, okay, it was just 1 out of 3 cases which failed.
Yeah.
And then it's just 1, so it's stupid, right? So you cannot make any conclusions here. And like it's you need to look into both, and of course you would say that's obvious, but not necessarily. Sometimes you have KPIs which are percentage based, and you just don't do that, right? So basically, coming back to this example, we spend a lot of time for multiple months. We have quite little amount of data. That data in percentage amount simply didn't make a lot of sense. It was jumping a lot. That's what happens when you have little data. One day you have like spike of something or anything. It doesn't flatten. Like there's no proper stable lines there. So at the end of the day, like I'm raising a question, like, okay, since I believe many of the listeners will be coming from the product world, like couldn't we have just spent those 2 months of development doing some other features, and product manager could just have gone do some user interviews?
Yeah, easier. By the way, it's another way of getting data, right? It's a different type of data, but it's still data. Talking with users, you get a lot of insights, and you manage to actually feel the data.
Yeah.
This is something that a lot of times I miss when I'm looking at the data. It's like the feeling, right? This is the user, let's say, success rate, no, is 99%. Is it bad or good? But when a user comes to you and is shouting on your ear, it doesn't work once every 100 times, then you feel that they actually care a lot about these things. And in that context, again, we are talking about the data needs context and talking with users and finding that those problems are actually important for them. And a lot of times it happens the opposite, right? You talk with the user, you're trying to fix something for many long period of time. You talk with the user and user said, well, it's there. I can live with it. Yeah. It's fine. So you don't need, it's not that you don't need to fix it, but you can prioritize it totally different.
Yeah, I think that's something that often people forget when speaking about data. It's basically that, even if you look at the world of science, so, there is qualitative methods of gathering data and there is quantitative methods of gathering data. So, and from my experience, absolute majority of people in like software industry and product industry, basically when they think about data, it's usually about quantitative data. Like, yes, more and more people now are talking about, okay, like user interviews, do user interviews. If you're a product manager, do user interviews. Or if you're a UX person, do user interviews. That's more and more heard, but I'm not yet sure if there is still that connection. But okay, data might be either coming from your talking to users and what insights you got, or is it something that is quantitative? But I'm not sure why is it like.
I think we should be in the middle. I think both are important, and you cannot just say I'm that data driven and not talk to users. Like you need to do both. Talking with users every single day. Checking your data every single day, and then you will be able to put context to your data and make smarter decisions. At least that's how I perceive how this.
Yeah, I also have an assumption that maybe it's a little. How do I put this? It's a bit more representable to have quantitative data. Like imagine
it's easier to read.
Yeah, it's easier to read.
Well, this is what people think, by the way. A lot of times, I don't know if it had happened to you. But you put a graph into one person, and one reads it one way, and the other reads it in the other way, and you are looking at the same number, and you're like, wait, I'm seeing it in a third way. So not always having numbers give you one perspective, right? You can also look it into different ways. So, yeah.
Yeah, and in general, I assume that it's a bit easier. Like, how do you put this? Like, imagine there's an, email sent, in your company. Like, basically, someone sent an email. There is a graph, there are numbers. Like, everyone understands that. Now, if, you will send an email saying, hey, I spoke to, like, 3 users, and, they all said that, okay, like, this feature, it's not that much important. So now, what is stronger here? Like, difficult to say, right?
Yeah, there's no one answer for everything.
Yeah.
Sometimes one, sometimes the other. Emotions are very important. Context, again. Yeah. There is a lot of companies now, like it's becoming more and more popular to use OKRs for everything. What do you think about OKRs?
Yeah, I have a special place for OKRs in my heart.
Why?
I know OKRs are super like... they're actually widely adopted among like what we call unicorns in Vilnius, I guess, or companies who want to be unicorns. And in general, like I would say quite many companies are adopting OKRs. Like it's just like with any type of methodology, like whatever you pick, basically, like, you could say that you cannot say that it's because of methodology itself, that something is bad. But I think there is some to it, like especially if you use it incorrectly. I mean, I get all of that. But at the same time, like if we think about product software development, right? You're developing products, you're getting them out of the door, you want to see some changes in your KPIs. And like if you think about OKRs, that sounds amazing, right? Like, you have, for example, quarterly periods where you're shipping something, rolling something out, and you expect the KPIs to move. Great, on paper, right? some of the mistakes that we happen during that period is, if you don't have a hierarchy of KPIs, what happens, you pick the topmost KPI, you say, okay, I want revenue to increase. That's, obvious. Like everyone wants revenue to increase. And then, if you look at your, if you look at what you're actually doing in order to improve that KPI, let's say you have this 3 months period, during which you expect your KPI to move, and you spend, 2 months on developing it. And, before developing it, maybe you had to do something. After, maybe you had to do something. So, okay, so let's say it took you 2.5 months, and now you have 2 weeks during which, you expect that KPI to change, basically. And that's an ideal scenario if you have those 2 weeks. So basically what happens is that, what happens is that if you don't set your KPIs properly, then what happens is that you have this period of time during which your KPIs simply won't change, right? Of course, then you could argue, okay, then we need maybe input KPIs. Okay, that's a good thing, like to have this hierarchy. If you have this hierarchy nailed out, that's good. But now at the same time, what also happens is, like product development, it's like there's a lot of discovery on the go, right? You do something, you roll out something, okay, you notice something didn't work out, you do that again. There's a lot of discovery, and this discovery also means that on the go, you're likely to find other KPIs as well, right? So, and what you may end up seeing is that, like, okay, if you put revenue as your main KPI to do some product, like code changes, like I guess everyone will agree that doesn't make sense. But if you put some, lower level KPIs, which kind of makes sense, but okay, maybe they will change in that period. Like still what basically might happen is that you may end up seeing that input KPI that you set in the beginning, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Once you're in the go,
I actually have talked with other PMs here in Vilnius, and the feedback I got from those that are applying OKRs very strongly is that you fall into the pit of focusing on quick wins, because those are the ones that are going to actually improve your OKRs very quickly, and you forget a little bit about the strategic thinking of where do I want to be in 2 years, and you end up doing quick wins. That, by the way, I'm not saying that quick wins are not good. I think quick wins are great, and we should all do quick wins, but we should not forget about our strategic thinking of where do we want to be in 2 years, where do we want to be. And it's a pit that people can fall very easily, and especially junior PMs, because they see the OKR, I need to meet them, and at the end, it just doesn't work.
It's very difficult, even if you think about, there are some things that you just cannot measure. Like, let's say your company wants to improve a quality.
Or UX.
Or UX. How do you measure it? More clicks? Don't put this bullshit to us, right? Like, it's very difficult to measure it.
There's a lot of KPIs that yesterday I had a 1 hour talk with my business analyst, thinking we're going to release something. How do we measure it? And we were trying to brainstorm all together what is the KPIs we want to measure, and they were nothing. But
Or another example is if there are, as you said, very big strategic changes. Like, imagine you're a CEO of a company, you have those OKRs in place, you have everyone in your company focused on those quick, small wins. Now, how do you justify those big changes, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's your KPI? That's what your people will ask you, right?
Yes.
Okay, you want to do this big change. What's your KPI? Like, and, you will not see any KPI changes for, maybe a year. That's a big change,
maybe
right?
That's good, by the way. Sometimes you need to let it be and wait until the actual change will happen. Users need to adapt. And sometimes it just takes a little bit more time, and you cannot actually measure the impact the day after. I love those changes that you can measure the impact the day after, because you just release and you're still on the hype, and boom, you see the change, and then
dopamine.
Exactly. So we're almost coming to the end today. And what are your takeaways?
So I hope that we kind of made this point that data without context is just data, right? And not necessarily information that you can act upon. But being data-driven is a teamwork, right? Like, you cannot expect just a single person to solve all your problems. Doesn't work. But not everything can be measured. I don't know. What else?
I don't know. I hope that the people that was listening to us today will start thinking that or will get their mind around the data-driven approach without not looking at your users, not talking with others, not actually finding what is behind those numbers, it makes actually more sense, right? It will make much more sense to actually look at, just not at the number, look at everything. What you have around, it will be much better for you and for your product at the end of the day.
It's very important to mention, I guess, that data is super important.
No.
Just to make it clear.
Have data.
Have
measure
analysts.
Everything. You must measure absolutely everything.
Main KPI, input KPI, yes. Everything.
But have an opinion. Have the context, and then your product will actually be better. Just don't look at it like, I don't know if you say this in Lithuania, but in Spain we say like, don't look like a horse. Because horses have this thing on the eyes, and they just look front, like just to the data. No, they look at
bigger
everything.
Picture, basically,
bigger picture
and around you.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So thank you for listening to us today. I hope you enjoyed, Tomas.
I for sure did.
Yeah. I hope you also enjoyed. And if you're listening to this, it's because you actually got into this. And we are actually how long? Like 36 minutes in, kind of. So yeah. So if you want, actually, I thought that if you want to share this, share and tag us on LinkedIn or whatever platform that you're going to use. And if you want to start a conversation, let's just start it.
Feel free to disagree.
Yes, feel free to disagree. Let's hear what people have to say about this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Tomas.
Thank you all.
Thank you for listening, guys.
Until next time.
Yeah. Bye-bye.